this is a scale model of the ark with a scale model of an elephant to give you an idea of the size of the ark. Now, once again, this was if Noah, yeah, you got a grip on that, right? I used to have a little lady, but she disappeared. She was much smaller. And so this ark is actually to scale for this animal. There's a neat man up north that builds these. He builds bigger ones, but this is all I could carry around. And the ark was a minimum of 45 by 75 by 450 feet long, which means you could get 522 standard-sized railroad boxcars in the ark. Think about the last time you stood next to a train. Okay? That's 1.5 million cubic feet of space. That's if Noah was my size. If Noah was a taller man, let's say basketball player size like Shaq, his cubit would have been bigger, and therefore his ark could have been up to 10 million cubic feet of space, because you're multiplying 3 ways, aren't you? And so the ark was plenty big to take the animals in. That wasn't a problem. Next question people will ask, because that's the first question people will ask, how'd you get all those animals on the ark? Next question they'll ask is they'll say, well, how'd you get all the animals there? How'd you get the kangaroos there from Australia? How'd you get, they'll just start, how'd you get all the animals there? Well, that's easy. They're forgetting even the secular scientists believe it was one landmass back then. So that was easy. They could have all hopped, walked, slithered, waddled, whatever they had to do to get there. And you got to remember, they didn't go out on safari for the animals. God brought the animals. Evan Almighty has that in his, where the animals come to him in the movie, and it just cracks me up because really the Bible says that God brought the animals. And when my kids were little, somebody gave them a Bible story book that actually had on there that Noah and his family went out looking for the animals, and I got rid of the book. And my husband got very upset with me, and I said, because it was a gift, and I said, I don't care, it's blasphemy. We're not teaching it to our children. And he's like, oh, this is going to be fun, because that was our first child, and he's thinking, oh no. That was before I was speaking on this stuff. He knows better now. Anyway, okay, so he knows just to give it up, and I try to be nice, and it's bad, and I wouldn't give the book away because I didn't want to give blasphemy to anybody else. That's what got him so upset. I was like, no, can't give it away. You have to get rid of it. Anyway, so they did not go get the animals. The animals came to them. And some people believe they had over 100 years to build the ark. We don't know for sure how long they had to build the ark, but they could have, because it has a verse in there that says that something about 120 years. Could be read that way, it could be read otherwise. The point is, God gave them some time. God called the animals. It was one big landmass at the time. The animals would have had time to migrate to where the ark was, and just the animals God wanted would have gotten on the ark. So it wasn't a problem them all getting there, because we all believe it was one large landmass pre-flood. And where that comes from is that in Genesis it says that God gathered the waters together into one place and let the dry land appear. So if the water was in one place, then the land was in the other place. And it says that there were seas, but we believe that those are inland seas. Isn't that interesting that they have it a crescent shape? And I called Answers in Genesis when they put this publication out originally. And that's called Rodinia, not Pangea. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. And even the secular scientists call the original supercontinent Rodinia, which is Russian for motherland. And I said to them, how do you know that it had a crescent shape? And it's because of the magnetic field lines. When rocks are laid down, they take on particular magnetic field lines determined by where they are on the planet, and so they can tell how they fit together. I thought that was interesting. So it's how apparently pilots and sailors and stuff can still tell where they are on planet Earth by those magnetic field lines as they see them on equipment. So I know. I say this stuff, have no idea what I'm talking about, and I see pilots and sailing people go, uh-huh. So that's just how it is. Anyway, the third question, so 2 questions so far. How'd they get all the animals on there? How'd they get all the animals there? The third question that people will ask is they'll say, well, if you rained out all the water from the Earth's atmosphere today, you'd only get 2 inches worldwide, so how do you explain a world-covering flood? And that's really a good question. And the really good answer is, that's easy. If you were to drop the mountains and raise the valleys and the ocean floors and flatten the planet out, we'd all be under almost 2 miles deep of water today. They'll tell you that at SeaWorld. And so where Where's the water from the flood? It's in the oceans. We're told in Psalm 104, verse 8, that God dropped the valleys and raised the mountains at the end of the flood so the floodwaters would stay where they belong. And so we know that they actually were on the planet. The planet's still covered by 72% water. That's where the floodwaters are. It's there. They were just distributed differently at that time. Okay, then we're told that God actually opened the great fountains of the deep. That is in Genesis 7:11, the convenience store verse. But anyway, and when God opened the great fountains of the deep, it was possibly, Dr. Danny Faulkner says that he thinks God used comets to open the fountains of the deep. Don't know. It's interesting, though. He had an article on it. Dr. Danny Faulkner now works for Answers in Genesis, but he used to teach, he's a PhD, and he used to teach at the University of South Carolina until recently. And he had an article that he published that talked about how we see cometary hits on this whole side of the solar system. There was a high impact, low duration event. So a lot of comets didn't last long. And part of the reason they say that is because, are you guys aware that we only see one side of the moon? I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, I never thought about that before. It always does look the same, doesn't it? Okay, we only see one side of the moon. It's what's in a synchronous orbit is what it's called. And so it turns, every revolution is the same as every rotation. So we only see the face, right? The face, the man in the moon. And that face is caused by some big craters. That's what gives it that face look to it. Well, do you know it doesn't have big craters like that all around it? It only has that on one side. It's got smaller craters all around it, but it only has those really big craters on one side. And so because of that, scientists say there must have been a high impact, big comets, bang, bang, bang. Low duration because the moon turns around us every 28 days, so it should have gotten hit on more than one side if it was a long-term event that occurred. Does that make sense to everybody? And his article went on to say that we see that on Mercury, Venus, here on planet Earth, we see those kind of cometary hits low in the rock layers, which is where we would think the flood layers started, on the moon and on Mars. Pretty neat, huh? So the point is that he suggests possible comets that God opened it up with, and that's why rather than asteroids. But if you ever saw the movie Dinosaurs with Aladar when you were a kid, I know that's going back a ways. You guys know what I'm talking about? There was a Disney cartoon, Aladar. Wow, see, I guess my 28-year-old used to watch it as a kid. It's a really good one. You guys should watch it. For an evolutionary one, he's a caring dinosaur. He was cool. My kids watched all the dinosaur stuff. You could guess that, right? Anyway, they talk about in there how there was an asteroid that hit the planet that caused the dinosaurs to become extinct. And frequently you'll hear that stuff. Well, we just believe it was probably comets, not asteroids. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow when we talk about dinosaurs. One way or another, that was when Rodinia, the one large continent, broke up. And we're going to talk about that a little more in a minute. And that when that broke up and those continents moved, they banged back together underwater. And that was when we believe Pangaea existed. We believe Pangaea was the last supercontinent, just like they do, but we believe it never was above the water. It was always underwater because it was during the flood. And then as everything moved back apart and settled to where it is today, that's why we see the 7 continents that we see today. We believe that happened during the year of the flood. Now, most people, if you ask them how long was the flood, what do you think the answer is? How long's the flood? What?
People would say it's going to be like millions of years.
No. I mean in the church. If you ask somebody in the church, how long was the flood? 40 days and 40 nights, right? No, that was good. I appreciate it. 40 days and 40 nights, right? Why do we believe that? Because it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. It shows we haven't read the rest of the chapters. There's 3 chapters on the flood. Genesis 6 through 9. Thank you. And thank you. Genesis 6 through 9. And the trick is that the flood lasted for over a year. They were stuck on the boat for over a year. The waters prevailed for 5 months, 150 days before they started to recede. Think about it. They didn't get off that vessel for over a year. Oh, Not fun. Okay, I don't know about you, I like the boat, but not that much. I don't want to be stuck on it for that long. Not fun. Anyway, and so all this stuff occurred in that period of the year. You just got to get that in your mind right off, because if I tell you all this and you guys are thinking 40 days and 40 nights, I regularly have parents come up to me at seminars and go, how did all that happen in 40 days and 40 nights? And I think, oh, I forgot to mention that. Okay, so it's not 40 days and 40 nights. All this stuff I'm going to tell you about. Now, what I'm going to do, and you physical science students have heard this before, so you guys just bear with me here. It'll be a review for you. The catastrophic plate tectonics model. Okay, so I'm going to give you a very exquisite model as to what possibly happened during the flood. It was originally put out at the International Conference for Creation in Pittsburgh. Pretty sure it was in 1984, and it was put together by, I think, 6 of the smartest, in my opinion, PhDs within creation science today, okay? Very smart guys. And you physical science students, you read about Russ Humphreys and his magnetic field of the Earth, that he had the theory on that, the rapid decay theory. He's one of the 6 guys. Dr. Wise, Dr. John Baumgartner, I told you about a minute ago, he's one of the 6 guys. Okay, so really, really smart guys came up with this. I don't want you to think any of this is mine. It's not, okay? You guys all know that the exterior of the Earth is the hard part, and that the interior is, it gets molten, and then at the very center, it's solid again, right? Okay, and you remember that. And the crust of the Earth is very thin. It's only between 8 and 35 miles deep, and it's 4,000 miles to the center of the Earth, 8,000 miles across, so it's very thin. It's kind of like the skin of a peach is the hard part, just so you know. Okay, when God opened the fountains of the deep and it ripped that supercontinent apart, we have the land plate being separated from the ocean plate. Now, I want you to understand this is how these exist today. The ocean plates of the Earth are thinner and denser, like floor tile. That's my picture, because it works for me in my head. And the land plates of the Earth are thicker and lighter, like carpet. So far, tile, carpet. Okay, tile is under the ocean, carpet is the land. And why? Well, because the interior of the Earth is called, the mantle is called plastic rock. It actually gives because it's so hot that it's actually molten. And so because of that, you have tile and carpet basically sitting in thick honey, which is going to go down farther. The tile, right? And what does water do? Water runs off to the lowest possible point. So what you end up having is land being exposed because it's the carpet. The tile sinks lower in the honey, which is the mantle, and water runs off over the ocean. And that's why the oceans stay over the oceanic plates. They stay over the tile because the tile rides lower in the honey. You with me so far? Okay, even the evolutionists agree with that part. I just want you to know this is how it exists today. Okay? That the ocean plates are made up of basalt rock, which is denser and thinner, and that the land plates are predominantly made up of granite, which is thicker but lighter, less dense rock. So it's higher in the mantle. So far, so good. At the time when God opened the fountains of the deep, we believe that that was broken. And so what happens is that the tile would sink into the mantle, where the carpet, okay, the carpet would float. And so as the tile starts to sink into the mantle, because it is denser, it's heavier, it literally is being burned, and it starts to get sucked in. And as it gets sucked in, it actually causes what's called runaway subduction, where it's being pulled into the interior of the Earth. Now, on the other end of that tile, there's still carpet attached in places, because it all was attached before. So what's happening is, as it's being pulled into the interior of the Earth, it's literally ripping the continent apart. Oh, it's ripping the continent apart. That's what happened to the landmass. It starts to rip it apart. I want you to think, too, what would happen where you have this rip? You have the ocean. Here you've got the land, and you've got the ocean plate. And when you open this, what happens is the ocean is exposed to the mantle of the Earth, and it's like putting hot water on a hot skillet. What happens to it? It makes steam and it shoots up, doesn't it? You guys have all done that at home, I'm sure. I have many times. And so when you have that happen, it literally causes superheated jets of air to be shot all the way up to about 7 miles high up into the atmosphere. It takes with it all sorts of little particles of sand and sediments. And so for you people that have already done physical science, cloud condensation nuclei, and it provides the warm water and the particles needed for a lot of clouds to start forming, and that would explain how you could get a special global rain for 40 days and 40 nights.